Okay, so now we will have the panel dedicated to Russian long flights and stations on which they were performed. And we will have introductory remarks. They will be performed by, presented by Dr. Valery Bogomolov, who is the chief lead of our long-term flights, life sciences and medical. All the medical support are led by under him, and the other people are involved in these long-term flights on Salyut or Mir, mostly on Mir station, and I will ask them to take seats, and I will very shortly present them. Please, David. Mm-hmm. And Volodya, where is our... Uh-huh. Окей. Хотел поздороваться, с ними поздоровались.
Не поздороваться, потому что наушники надо здесь.
Ему наушники, да, и хотя, я думаю, ему не нужны. Окей. So, besides two cosmonauts who represent Russian and American group of cosmonauts who flew Mir station, this is Dr. Titov, Mr. Titov, the cosmonaut who the first performed one-year flight on Mir station, and Dr. David Wolf, who performed his flight on Mir station under frame of our joint program, Russian-American program, which was run from 90 to 98 years, for 8 years, David Wolf. And the other people, about Dr. Bogomolov I already told you, and the other people, Dr. Katuntsev is the first in the row. He is the lead in our EVA for many, many years. I don't even remember for how long. And next to him is Vadim Gushin, who is one of creators Russian psychological program of psychological support. He will tell himself about this to you. And Dr. Nechayev, next after Dr. Gushin, who has, I would say, two heads. One head was also psychology, this man-machine interaction, and on the other side, and the other head, he was a chief he was involved in organizing our international collaborations with different countries, including with the United States. And last but not the least is leading engineer Evgenia Yermanova, who is head of our department. We call this department of main designer, but main designer is the director of institute, who is not an engineer, so he has a deputy who helps him in engineering. This woman, Mrs. Yermanova, at the end, who will talk about the facilities on our long-term station. So that's it. And everybody welcome to participate in the discussion. After these people will tell you a little bit in what they would like to present you in their area. So, Валерий Богомолов, прошу. А я пойду сяду.
Ну, я прежде всего хочу...
First and foremost, I would like to say how much of an honor it is for me to be speaking in front of the summit. The amount of authority and knowledge accumulated in this room is just a great honor, especially speaking after the Skylab panel. It's a pleasure and a privilege. And I want to tell you that the Russian long-term station program, starting with Salyut programs, a number of Salyuts that we had, and then moving on to the Mir station. With respect to all of those programs, biomedically speaking, the focus was on researching the flight and mission environment and their impacts on the living systems, human system first and foremost, additionally trying to resolve the issues having to deal with human survival in this environment. What made these programs special was that each milestone in these programs was based on a major modeling and ground segment testing and simulation. And the body of experience that would be accumulated would be used to dictate the necessity to examine all of the aspects and ground conditions, safety, productivity, science, and utilization. All of these would be resolved before we would be go for the program itself. That would be the philosophy. And I have to tell you that the Salyut stations and the Mir station are rich with examples of the following. A lot of dramatic, heavy events that had medical repercussions, events that were important as far as the lessons learned for the future. I need to start by saying that the first Mir increment that lasted around 28 days, and the program was implemented fully and very successfully. And the cosmonauts did a great job with their mission, but during the latter stage of the flight, there was a technically driven tragedy due to the and the three cosmonauts, Dobrovolsky, Volkov, Patsayev, perished as a result of the loss of pressure. So starting with 1970s, early 1970s, I was fortunate to be playing a part in these space programs. And this tragic situation, where all of a sudden, very unexpectedly, you are there receiving the perished cosmonauts returning from space in their flight suits but no spacesuits. It's something that leaves an indelible impression on you for years to come. And it's a spiritual loss in addition to the physical loss too. Having said that, even this mission, there was quite a success as far as science that had been performed in the countermeasures program that was implemented, and psychological aspects that were worked on. You know, it yielded major results. Even the autopsy results, when performed on the crew members, yielded some unexpected results, but results nevertheless. These results having to do with the body changes when impacted on by spaceflight, as well as a result of the special considerations that the cosmonauts had, but had not been identified prior to the flight. The cause of death was the decompression, explosive decompression is what we call it, and for about 30 minutes our crew members were in this condition. Having said that, the long-term orbital station program continued thriving. There were some less fortunate salutes that happened down the road. One of the salutes that lost pressure, and after the depress event, the Salyut program basically had to be terminated, and then Salutes 3, 4, and especially 6 were quite a major success as far as the results they yielded. Some special considerations vis-à-vis these programs that need to be mentioned. First and foremost, biomedically speaking, they gave us the opportunity to examine the borderline capabilities of a human being to be able to perform, to maintain performance during a long-term spaceflight. And so a gradual increase of the spaceflight duration all the way up to 6 months, and then on to a 211-day flight, and then 237 flight that Dr. Ochkov was one of the participants on. All of these gradual steps had been predetermined based on some factors, mainly based on the fact that medical and biomedical programs and goals, health-oriented programs were the top priority. And I wanted to emphasize and re-emphasize this. And so all of the developments, all of the preconditions, all the protocols provided by the medical, biomedical, hygiene, and specialists had to be implemented to the T. And it was a major victory when Mr. Manarov and Mr. Titov, who is here with us now, performed a year-long flight. And also, it's important to realize that the longer a flight is, then the less functional changes we'll be observing in these crew members post-flight. It once again indicates to us that the human body changes. I'll just concentrate on the skeleton, which is a separate issue in and of itself. But the basic performance capabilities and the body health hinge greatly on the degree of maintaining the protection countermeasures. A whole different page is the Mir station. Some of the major differences that made it different from the Salyut stations series had to do with a great body of the science and research modules in the station. This station's purpose, primary goal, was to perform science and research activities. And as early as the Salyut stations and then on the Mir station later, there would be an increasing quantity of the biomedical research projects that will be implemented based on the international cooperation modes. First as part of the Intercosmos program, then on separate individual research projects. And not only are we talking about visiting crews, the political flights, as we call them, for the representatives of countries friendly to the Soviet Union, but also we're talking about the programs where each of the nation players would be making their contribution, adding their technical capabilities to the big pie. And then, of course, as in tight cooperation with the Soviet scientists, there were some really fascinating experiments that did end up being performed. So, with respect to the Salyut stations, there had been some unique activities that did occur there that are still unique to this day. When Salyut 7, we were this close to losing, and a crew was sent to restore the station. with no light, with no power, with no heat, with no life support system to speak of, with no functioning ecoless system to speak. And Savyut and Janibekov, the two cosmonauts, did something that's out of the ordinary. In tight cooperation with the ground personnel, when they did restore the station, and they did that successfully. And then the subsequent crew working on the station, Mr. Solovyev and Mr. Kizim, were operating two stations. There was a Mir that was launched by then, and also the Salyut that had been in flight still, Salyut 7. So a complement of the most valuable equipment had to be transferred from Salyut 7 to the Mir station. What were the primary goals set before us back then? I've already mentioned this. These were to define the boundaries of the functional capabilities as far as the human body is concerned, and to develop a set of countermeasures and protection capabilities. And these flights were performed on 237-day flight was performed on one of the Salyut stations. On the Mir orbital station, I have to say that from the very beginning, it was a multi-module structure, and international cooperation played a very direct role in this station. Such programs as the ones involving Austria, Germany, and their leading science centers, as well as France, would be performed. And these were the programs with Bulgaria as well. And these were not a single flight, one-off kind of experiment. These were multiple mission experiments that would be monitoring the development of a certain phenomena. First, the cardiovascular system and its performance and its dynamic changes during a long-term flight. Dr. Kureltsev was his project. Locomotive system and countermeasures to support it was another field of study. The sensory system study was another major one. And in support of these experiments, there was one-of-a-kind equipment developed and built. And I have to tell you, I'm still grieving over some of that equipment that's gone now, because even in this day and age, on the Russian segment of the International Space Station, we have not been able to fully expand ourselves to the capabilities that we did once have on the Mir. All right. Any other goals? I want to talk to you about the flight duration. Even back then, we were thinking about developing long-term interplanetary flight to Mars. And then we conceived of a project. Dr. Polikov flew for 438 days as part of 3 consecutive missions, increments. And not only did he examine his own and his crew's health, not only did he perform equal share of a cosmonaut set of responsibilities supporting ecoless and station maintenance and so on and so forth. He also performed a great body of biomedical experiments, biomedical program, as it were. And this biomedical program, research program, was quite extensive, featuring in-lab testing, not just functional tests. There was a great amount of tasks that Dr. Polikov performed on his own, based on his own initiative and proactive nature. For example, he was one of the first to try vestibular testing on board. He actually devised these regimens. And research that was close to what had been done on Skylab. Balance study. Not exactly the same as Skylab, but similar. So those were intended to examine the relationship between food rations, diet, and body mass and other aspects based on the equipment that we had available. He was the one who developed a program, a joint Russian-French or Russian-Austrian program. This is Inessa's favorite, so there was a lot of experiments that came from Germany during this flight. Remarkably, post-flight, the crew members' health status was, let's say, better than for the other crew members who had flown for a shorter period of time. He actually stepped out of the capsule on his own. He was very active. He was enthusiastic at landing, trying to exemplify that this is something that's within reach. And he assumed that biomedical issues, aside from radiation exposure during a Mars mission, to a large degree have already been solved in this respect. And it's these research programs that lay the foundation for the future research. We'll be talking about one of them today, Mars 500. A whole separate part of the program that needs to be mentioned is the Mir Shuttle program. The head of the science department on the NASA side, Mr. Huntoon, played a major part, Mr. Abbey as well. This program was designed and built as a joint program. It wasn't only something that would be dealing with solving technical issues, connecting and interfacing various kinds of in-flight capabilities, connecting one transportation vehicle to another module, and so on and so forth. But this was a program whereby a science program would be a truly bilateral Russian-American program. It was developed using NASA and Russian capabilities and scientific minds. It was very actively joint program that it was yielded the most results compared to a unilateral, one nation types of research capabilities. And the reason why is obvious. There's a lot of training, a lot of preparation, a lot of technical capabilities used to support and provide success, a lot of technical interaction. And medically speaking, which is closer to home for me, what's important and what needs to be mentioned is that compatibility of the systems, medical support and health system compatibility, using NASA developments, combining them with Russian developments. A large body of experience was accumulated. A large body of experience, something that was built on previous experience. A large emphasis was placed on involving flight surgeons and mission control center specialists in supporting and assuring success of these programs. And they did end up proving that we ended up being ready to develop a joint medical support program needed for an International Space Station support. Not to say that this program went without a hitch. And we need to mention that because 7 astronauts, but there were all kinds of situations. There was a fire, for example. And we had a depress event before that, and the loss of one of the modules. A long-term station, as it was operated, started malfunctioning on the echoless side. Had to do with the biodegradation of some of the elements, structural fatigue, and so on and so forth. So what is the experience? What are the lessons that needed to be and had been learned since then? It is such that these situations laid the foundation required to develop a whole number of flight rules, a whole variety of flight rules, requirements, and conditions that were the environment in which this program proceeded. The goal being to not have any health impacts for the crew. And then mutual trust and mutual understanding, not to be discounted. Because Russian crew members were part of the shuttle program, the ones that would be docking on the shuttle to the Mir station. And then USOS crew members, American crew members were part of the long-term increments. There were periods when we had some transportation system issues and cargo flow and so on and so forth. And all of these questions would be resolved with ease and efficiency provided by a truly international environment where you had common commitments and common goals. And I can talk about this for a long, long time. However, I do believe that I should probably stop. Anyway, the purpose of long-term orbital station flights was to develop aspects of long-term flights. Technically speaking, it was systems that would be functioning for extended periods of time, and so that one was resolved. Countermeasure system. It was developed. There was a dynamic program that would constantly be complemented with new developments. We gained better and deeper insight into the mechanisms underlying human behavior and the kinds of countermeasures we needed to develop to mitigate these events. And last but not least, we gained experience of mitigating major off-nominal situations. A major outcome, in my opinion, is that we have a higher efficiency to our international cooperation between science centers and educational centers that yield the fruit of multiple, various long-term, I want to emphasize long-term science programs and projects that are multiple flight programs, not just a one-off type of activity. And in summary, I want to thank a lot of the people who are in the room right now. I want to thank you for making sure that the Mir program was a success. Thank you.
If you have any urgent questions, because the discussion and question and answers we will have after main presentations, okay? So if anybody has urgent question right now, go ahead.
Quick question.
No? Okay. So then I will ask Dr. Katontsov to add to presentation of Dr. Bogomolov. As I said, to add from his experience and from his knowledges, data. He was involved. I will tell you that one of the difference, what I see between Russia and Russian and other country programs and practice, that in Russia we have, I would say, maybe extra stability. People are working for years and years in the very same area. Like, as I said, Dr. Bogomolov started as a scientist who participated in in-flight programs and analog experiment. But for many years already, he is our leader. It is very easy for us to work with him because we know all his good and bad features, and that is very good. Believe me, yeah. And the same I will tell about Dr. Katuntsev. He is a leader in EVA for how many years? For how many years? С какой? С Салюта, да?
Да, с Салютом, так 40 лет я вообще работаю.
Just 40 years. So, go ahead.
Большое спасибо, Инесса Бенедиктовна, за представление. Большое спасибо за ваше внимание. Как уже сказал Валерий Васильевич, как раз вот этот период реализации наших исследований на орбитальных станциях «Салют» и «Мир», это как раз является тот период бурного развития пилотируемой космонавтики в нашей России и переход, как уже говорил Валерий Васильевич, на выполнение длительных космических пилотируемых полетов. Ну, вот сегодня утром показывали динамику бюджета в Соединенных Штатах, вот относительно, так сказать, на этапе подготовки к программе Scale-up. Вот я точно не имею такие данные по нашей стране, но точно знаю, что как раз...
On the Russian budget developments, but I remember distinctly when back in the middle of 70s, and I was the head of a smaller group at the Institute of Biomedical Problems. Every time when it used to come to the necessity to conduct additional effort to provide extra safety for the crews up on orbit, there was no much need to keep asking for the money for a long time. The money used to be made available very quickly, and there was a lot of understanding towards these kind of problems. And every time we witnessed a lot of attention being given to the human space flight, not only in the area of crew support itself, but also in the industrial effort. For instance, at our Zvezda facility, we have done a lot of work and actually developed a brand new system that allowed us to step up essentially and start doing business during EVA on a completely different level. A lot of this has to do with the development of Orlan spacesuit, which allows a lot more flexibility in order to conduct EVA. There was a water cooling system introduced in this spacesuit, which is in its turn set up the stage for being able to conduct EVA sessions for much longer time periods, as opposed to sporadic time periods which was available to us prior to that. Not too many people know that the beginning of the development of Salyut problem has to do with only 2 EVA sessions performed. March 18th, 1965 was the very first EVA session. Alexei Leonov, it's a famous one. And the other one was performed in 2 years, in January of 1969, during the flight of 2 Russian vehicles, Soyuz 5 and Soyuz 4. They have docked in space, and 2 crew members, Shatalov and Krunov, essentially moved from one vehicle to another one. Then those vehicles undocked, and with different complements of the crews, they have landed independently on the ground. For the first time, Orlan suit was tested as part of Salyut 6 flight in January of 1977, and our crew, Yuri Romanenko and Georgy Grechko, were the first ones to actually use the Orlan. After that, the Orlan suit went through several iterations of modifications, and it's going through improvements and modifications constantly, but it's always available on the station, and this is the purpose. It has to be available on the station so the crew can use this capability anytime the circumstances dictate. Very often we need to go outside in order to remove certain boxes. Every now and then it's necessary to limit our activities to the station, except some cases when we have got to bring those units back to the ground. As far as anthropometric capabilities, this particular spacesuit will accommodate the crew members for essentially almost any height. And one of the peculiarities that this spacesuit allows for one individual to actually wear this suit completely without any help of anybody else, which is different compared to what it used to be before. Salyut chase, during the Salyut chase flight, we have performed 3 EVAs with 2 crew members participating in each and every one. And then after that, during Salyut 7 times, we have conducted 13 EVA sessions. And then effective 1988, we moved to the Mir station, and all the program was designed in such a way that all the way from 1988 through 2001, we have conducted 78 EVA sessions altogether, and each and every one has been based on the utilization of Soyuz Orlan spacesuit, and this particular design is being used right now in support of our day-to-day activities, EVA-related activities, obviously, on the International Space Station. So it has become our major tool in order to achieve our EVA goals. Now, a couple of words on the medical aspects of EVA sessions outside of the pressurized volume. In order to support those kind of operations, we have developed a multi-stage system of medical support of the EVA. And we started out using this approach, getting ready for the UVA of the crew members on the ground even, prior to actual launch. The crew members used to spend quite a bit of time actually working in the vacuum chambers on all kinds of trainers and simulators. Then this system involved a very sophisticated medical checkout, which every crew member was subjected to approximately 2 weeks prior to the actual EVA. During the long-duration flight, in order to clearly understand the status, the functional status of this or that particular crew member prior to the EVA, to be able to judge on his ability to actually perform and achieve the goals of each and every EVA. And then during the actual EVA session, we used to provide essentially real-time monitoring of all kinds of different parameters, including temperature of the body and parameters associated with life control of the spacesuit. Now, this system is being used right now as well, because we haven't heard anything but just accolades in regards of this particular system. This attention being given to the status of health of the crew member is something that we have been proud of for a long time, because it gives us a lot of feedback, a lot of insight into the well-being of the crew member performing an EVA. And with this allows us to predict all kinds of negative developments that may occur. And I have to tell you that throughout the entire period of time we have been doing EVA, we haven't had even one instance when we cut the EVA session short due to the medical implications or medical repercussions. At the same time, while implementing these programs, we have gained an enormous amount of experience and knowledge that supports our capabilities to assure safety EVA activities outside of the pressurized volumes, not even now, but for many years to come, I'm sure. A big factor here is the ability of a human being to adapt to the space conditions, and it varies for different individuals, but we have stats that prove the ability of a crew member to successfully conduct the EVA session after 300-plus days on orbit, which shows that, first of all, the basics of the training program and the training pattern was chosen wisely, and secondly, it proves that the countermeasures and all the effort associated to support the well-being of the crew on orbit was done in the exemplary fashion, which proves and adds capabilities relative to the ability of the crew to go EVA after a long time spent on orbit. And we have collected a lot of information pertinent to the fact that people who are 50-plus years old are capable of performing very successfully during extra long duration flights. As you know, from the medical standpoint, all operations that are being performed on orbit, and particularly during EVA, are done with the hands. It's all manual work, so to say. So one of the goals of our team was to assess the physiological value, so to say, of those operations that are being performed by the crew members outside of the pressurized volume. And we have done this work predominantly during the Mir time, and in this case, the participation of our colleague Varely Polyakov was a huge help to us. We have received substantial data that allowed us to make certain predictions and come up with objective judgment of the issues associated with the ability of a crew member to perform outside of the pressurized volume, and this data was used as a basis for the feasibility study that proved the pattern that we have developed that essentially establishes a new approach to what the crew members do. It's not a sporadic work outside anymore. It's just a stable, just pretty much equal period of time the crew spends outside as inside. It's a long duration flight. The data was very interesting. In some instances, it showed us very vividly that every now and then, when people go outside frequently, they very quickly work out extra ability to perform outside, and at the same time their agitation level decreases drastically, which also serves as one of the greater ways to improve performance. And those things used to decrease like by 25%. So the crew, having worked the ability and a habit to work outside, used to lose less energy by like 20%, which gives them enough time, and more time actually, to work productively outside of the pressurized volumes. And I'd like to wrap up, and I'm being told I need to finish up. And if you happen to have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take those. Thank you.
Okay. So, Dr. Gushin, I would like to ask him to tell about the work which were provided in very special area of psychology, human factor, because I would say that we can say, all of us, that this period of time, I mean Mir and pre-Mir, when the long-term flights were developed, psychology attracted the most attention of people who were providing medical support in flights. And our psychologists from our institute and from Star City as well, and from other organizations with which we were working, they were the first who put attention to this area of medical support and developed a special approach to keep this, I would say, cosmonaut psychological performance on certain level. Please, Vadim, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say that just because of my age, of course, I'm not. I have to admit that I'm not one of the creators of that system which exists till now, but I am more or less patient pupil of those who are not here, who are not in that world, but my brilliant teachers. I want to start with the names, and the first name is Fyodor Gorbov, the person who took responsibility for the mental health of Yuri Gagarin, and he was the only one in the whole country who was sure that Gagarin could do it and could come back and not become crazy after the flight. Second name is the name of Mikhail Novikov, the name of the person who, for the first time in the country which was sharing socialist and communist ideology, was taking care about group interaction as an issue. Because in the country where the ideology was that all interaction is smooth because we're all brothers and sisters, to be the one who start thinking about crew compatibility, who start thinking that persons with strong will and motivation could be absolutely incompatible despite being very professional. Third name is the name of Professor Myasnikov, my teacher, who was taking care about sleep in space, who was doing a lot of research with sleep board. And the third name is the name of Slava Salnitsky, and my American colleagues worked with him, and at the end I will mention cooperation issue. And he was the only person who was the creator of the monitoring system in space based on the analysis of professional performance of astronauts, not of the artificial tests, not of the interviews, which are so common for the psychologists here on Earth, but who used the training device, which was specially made and delivered aboard to do docking as a crucial space operation. And the final name I want to mention is the name of Olga Kozyrenko, the creator of the system of psychological support. And to begin with, speaking about expectations, when a young student came to IBMP, his expectations were absolutely ruined, because it was not that I was learned while being a student of the university, because there were no ill people, there were no people who asked me for the support. At the same time, I had to monitor them somehow when they are very far away, and when they do not require any support, actually. So that's really an expectation which was absolutely ruined. And my first participation was the flight mentioned by Dr. Bogomolov, the flight of Gianni Bekov. And I was so much impressed by the professionalism, skills, and will and motivation of that people. I can't imagine how I can help them. Coming back to the point, what I had to understand during these years, what are the principles elaborated by those people I mentioned. And the first principle was that monitoring should be based on the observation of the real life, despite we are far away from the space crew. How to do it? And that was the first, let's say, insight of the Soviet system, to use crew communication as the main source of psychophysiological information. Because the crew was talking. They were talking, of course, about the business in flight, but more or less they expressed themselves in that talks. And that talk sometimes was sad, sometimes was a euphoria, sometimes there was a conflict tension in it. And I saw a group of people doing their conclusions based on the analysis of these talks. These experts were unique, and of course, they were unique not only because they can feel the subtle differences in tone, but also because they understood what the crew should do. They knew all the operations, they knew the schedule, they knew these people before the flight. So that means that these people were really unique, and their level of experience and professionalism was incredible. Second thing that was that this information, and this is very different from, I think, Western approach. It was not just the source of publications or reports. This monitoring data came to another group called Psychological Support Group. And according to the fairy tale or anecdote, I don't know how to call it, this system came from one difficult situation, and as academician Kozlovskaya said, that we learn not from good things, we learn from bad things. And that was a bad situation aboard with the death of the parents of the Russian cosmonaut during his flight, during his mission. And the task was to support him under that conditions, and that was actually the first step in the creation of that system. Because again, what to say, how to say, when to say, how to support under that conditions. If we can't do it here on Earth, just try to support somebody who lost his close friend or parent. It's difficult to imagine how to do it. But that came to the idea of step-by-step preparation during private talks with a cosmonaut. That allowed us to create the system of psychosocial contacts with close surrounding of the cosmonauts during the flight. Because those people who talked to him, that was his family, who tried to prepare him mentally to this event, to this situation. So again, that was bad, but so many ideas came which became the fundamental part of psychological support as we have it now. And what it is, speaking about results. Psychological support should be based on the actual situation and on the monitoring data. You cannot help a person if you do not know what is going on with him. You can't just come and say, let me help you. I don't need your help, it will be the answer. And from that point, all the support should be based on the monitoring data, very fresh, on the actual situation aboard. Second principle is that this support should be, first of all, a restoration of the psychosocial contacts that any astronaut is losing going far away from Earth. Because our life is a big network of psychosocial contacts, which we appreciate, according to this Antoine Saint-Exupéry, French writer. The most important thing that is our communication with other people. It's the most precious thing in our life. And to restore that network, to create a communication not just for operations, but for restoration of this social network is crucial. So they are not feeling like being dropped away from Earth and lost all the connections. Third principle is that we must not only restore the social part of information circle, but also the other part which we do not actually recognize while living on Earth. This is the information coming from nature. This is special noises of nature. This is sights of nature. This is smells. I can't forget a story by French astronaut who participated in the flight with Soviets, and they received a small bottle of cognac. And I expected to hear the stories about drinking, all these anecdotes. But what was the story? The story that they were smelling the bottle for the rest, the empty bottle, for the rest of the part of the flight when it was empty, because they missed that smell while aboard. So to restore not only social contacts, but the information flow was one of the principles which was established by Olga Kozarenko and her colleagues. And finally, what is the outcome or result? We should do that support individually, because if you do not know these persons, the crew members, before the flight, you cannot be able to establish good contact. And again, you can accept support only from your friends, not from the people from the streets, even if they have some brilliant names or good careers. The opportunity to choose psychologists that can support you during the flight is a very good thing. Final lessons learned, again, an anecdote to demonstrate the idea. During the flight of Johnny Bekov, which, as I said, is one of my first experiences in this area, in space psychology, to do him good, our group of psychological support center board a recording of the Beatles. Beatles in the Soviet period, that was something which was difficult to get and to listen. You couldn't get them on the radio or on the TV, not in the shops. So as for us, that was a gift. But his reaction to that, he was angry. Why? He said, my taste, my preferences, they were formed when I was young. And for me, this is nothing. That just means that you do not respect me, that you do not know me. You do not know what I prefer. This is, nothing can be just good as it is. It must be good for the particular person. And doing support, you have to do it for the particular person. To make the long story short and to conclude, during the next session on ISS, I will try to demonstrate that this system established by my teachers, it's alive. It's not only alive, but I'm honored to say that my distinguished American colleagues, Chris Flynn is here, Nick Canis, we made some very nice studies all together. But we are very much honored that they admitted that psychological support system created in IBMP in the Soviet Union was perfect, and they shared all that principles and developed them. I think this is the main lessons learned. Thank you for your attention.
Next, I would like to ask Dr. Nechayev if he has anything to add, maybe on a psychological topic, but if not, maybe to add on international cooperation, which was extremely highly developed on Mir station and on our stations, and Dr. Nechayev was one of person who was at the core of organization of this international work on stations.
Спасибо.
Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to give you a bit of a historical background and remind you that back in 1962, President Kennedy and the Soviet Prime Minister Nikita Khrushchev got down to the negotiating on direct cooperation in space. In 1990, the United States of America and the Russian Federation released a joint memo on space cooperation, and Mir shuttle program basically was the fruit of that agreement. Mir shuttle program was marked with events that could be listed as a number of firsts. For example, in February 1994, a Russian citizen, Sergei Krikalev, became the first Russian citizen, first Russian cosmonaut who performed a spaceflight on board the shuttle system. And Norman Taggart, an astronaut, became the first U.S. citizen that performed a mission during 115 days that he spent with his Russian colleagues on board the Mir station. Subsequently, in 1995, STS-71 became the first orbiter that docked to the Mir complex. The U.S. astronauts were part of 7 increments on board the Mir station, and during the period of 1994 through 1998, shuttle flew to the station 11 times, resupplying, launching crews, supplies, food, and what have you. Russian and American scientists and specialists performed a broad spectrum of research activities aimed at understanding and answering the following questions. How is it that humans, animals, plants perform in space? How do we deliver frontline space capabilities and technologies that will allow us to make the further steps into a space program of the future, both on low Earth orbit and beyond? And also, how is it that we should go about building the future of space stations? Valery, my colleague, Dr. Bogomolov, and my other esteemed colleagues already spoke to the fact that while implementing the international cooperation, there was a large number of various types of research projects performed in the field of biomedical and space life sciences. And being a specialist in such areas as daily psychology, human factor, and space ergonomics, I would like to dwell on just 2 experiments that occurred on Mir station, and they are as follows. First of all, I have to preface this by saying that a crew is something that defines and ensures mission success. And assuring professional reliability of crew performance is something that's a critical cornerstone that will later ensure safety and reliability of the mission and flight, and the results, the quality of the results that the science projects will yield. And so, Dr. Gushin already mentioned one of the experiments. This is Dr. Sarnitsky's experiment of IBMP fame. And I wanted to say the following on this experiment. This was something that modeled space cosmonauts' actual performance during rendezvous and docking. This was a math model that was created on, using software, and then telemetry would be uplinked, and then a cosmonaut who's on orbit using hand controllers would be performing rendezvous docking rendezvous, capture, and docking of a Soyuz vehicle to the Mir station. And this data from the hand controls will then be downlinked and then would be fed right back into the software model, describing the control logic. Later on, this experiment went to a following stage where the math model would be run on onboard computers, and something that I want to emphasize right here and right now. What served to develop this experiment is that it's not just the quality and precision that would be assessed and estimated, how much prop would be used by a crew member to perform these activities. Not only these parameters, but also psychological and physiological cost associated with these activities would be assessed based on psychophysical telemetry items that would be available during these experiments. This is one of the two experiments. The second one that also is directly related to my area of expertise, and this experiment has to do with the professional human reliability, human as an operator in space, error analysis, erroneous action analysis. Cosmonauts and crew members in general are humans, and humans are prone to error. Errors could be of any type, shape, and form, and the point of this experiment, the main point of this experiment was to identify the correlation between the the factors that would be affecting crew performance and lack or presence of errors in the actual steps and actions performed. So we performed a broad spectrum of analysis in real flight environment. A thank you is owed to the RSC Energia specialists, and in doing that we did establish a genuine, authentic correlation between the psychological and physiological conditions, the sleep shift, and the overall intensity of the schedule, and the potential errors that do become actual errors of crew performance. And by intensity, I mean by intensity of working and resting environment, we'll be assessing the sleep shift first and foremost, in addition to labor intensity of their schedule, sleep disorders, and so on and so forth. And so based on these inputs, we were able to build graphs and correlate graphs that will allow us to not only assess but also forecast errors. Then these activities kind of came to a halting stop because there were some disagreements between the participants as to what you would consider an error or an erroneous action. We were of the opinion that this is something that's a digression on behalf of a crew member from the logic or an algorithm predetermined by onboard data files. And there'll be a difference of opinions on this account. And so, regrettably, this line of business kind of came to a stop, like I said, and wasn't really developed beyond that. But I wanted to emphasize that for interplanetary flight, missions beyond low Earth orbit, flights towards Mars, especially with respect to these programs, the system that was run using computers, given some upgrades, obviously, could and will provide positive results for increasing performance reliability. And since my moderator is telling me to stop, I would like to stop by saying the following. I wanted to quote from Mir Shuttle program manager Frank Culbertson, who said, and he said, with respect to just this program, it's not that we were only teaching each other, but we were learning from each other, and both sides had a lot to offer. It wasn't a one-side street. And I'm thinking this, we prove this time and time again. And I'm thinking that the doors towards the highways that will take us beyond the low Earth orbit for future programs, be it asteroid flights or Mars mission, this kind of cooperation, this kind of mutual learning process and process of supporting each other will serve for humankind to go further and higher, above and beyond. Thank you very much.
Now we have two representatives of our astronautic corpus group, and it would be nice to listen their opinion and or their I would say recalling their memory about flying on Russian stations. Just summarizing what our psychologist told here, I would add one remark that the climate on our station was extremely friendly, extremely. I'm speaking not about, you know, friendship for the future life or, you know, but just the climate. And the best of it was told by one of astronauts, that was French astronaut who was flying shuttle flight. And when shuttle flight was docked to Mir station, he said to me, you know, Ines, when I asked him about, you know, the regiment, he said, we always ate on Mir station. We were working, we were doing our regimen, our task, and so on and so on. But dinner only on Mir station, because there was some climate of like we are home. And I think that is extremely important. And I was always grateful to our psychologist who could help cosmonaut to create such climate. So, Володь, может, я что не так сказала, так что вперед.
Nothing wrong, but, you know, off you go.
Mr. Titov, I think everybody knows him. He was the very first man who just showed that it is possible to fly even year and more. He was one of the first two-year flyers on Mir station. Please, Володя.
Спасибо. Ну, мы выслушали доклады.
Thank you. We've heard some presentations from experts in the fields of psychology and medicine, and I would like to kind of go back to the topic of this panel, Salyut and Mir programs, and some of the stats for you. I'm sure it will kind of shift gears for you, which is probably in order for right now. The Salyut program was devised a long, long time ago, and the first Salyut station was launched in 1971, as you may know. There was a total of 7 Salyut stations that orbited the Earth. Stations 1 through 5 had 1 docking port. These stations didn't last that long on orbit. While launching these stations, one of them was lost on ascent using due to launch vehicle malfunction. One of the stations was lost due to a depress event. It was launched, but then after one rev, we realized that it was losing pressure, and so we lost the station. Starting with Salyut 6, the orbital station was modified into a 2-docking port orbital station. Of course, this expanded the station capabilities as far as receiving 2 crews or 1 crew, 1 cargo vehicle, and adding a high level of variability and therefore flexibility as far as building and implementing a flight program. So looking at Salyuts 1 through 6, so the 6 first Salyuts over a period of 11 years. 6 stations over 11-year period. Salyut 7 lasted 9 years. So I asked that you look at the efficiency of the stations, how busy it was. And so Salyut 7 and Salyut 7 of the whole Salyut series, it was the most high-tech, cutting-edge. Only 25% of the time it was manned. 75% of the time it was in the automated flight without yielding any kind of usefulness except technical telemetry on the station itself, which is probably quite a costly endeavor for something like that. And so the station flew for 9 years through 1991, and we did have emergencies. You know about the crew that would Janibekov and Savinek crew that flew to recommission the station. The situation they found themselves in is not to be. Is not something to want to be in. Due to orientation error, the solar arrays weren't receiving the sun because they were in the wrong configurations. The batteries went to 0, the lights went down, the fans went down, the power went out. It was lights out, as you would call it. And I can tell you, it was something science fiction-like. It wasn't. There was no horror, but there was like a surprise kind of sensation. How could it be? If you freeze for a moment and you listen in, you can't hear anything. It's like you're in the afterlife where there's no noise. And it was the first time I ever sensed anything like that, ever. And now, the station design changes take us to the Mir station. The Mir station was being built based on the experience accumulated over the multiple years of the Salyut series stations, and so the Mir station had 6 docking ports. In other words, the new station could be modified in multiple ways and patterns. You could be adding or subtracting a module. You could be swapping modules. You could fly in the kind of configuration, the A configuration B. So high level of flexibility, a plug-and-play type of thing. And so my increment was the third prime increment. The first one was quite short. It was when Kazim and Solovyev went to Salyut 7, collected some important critical items, and transferred them to the Mir station. The second one lasted 326 days. It was a record for that era, with a very efficient flight too. They brought the Quant module, and this was the module, one of the original modules that expanded the station capabilities. And this was something that carried a really incredible astrophysical, X-ray, ultraviolet pieces of equipment, and so the station started being similar to a multi-complex type of structure. Our increment started with the crew handover. Obviously, we were taking the place of the crew that had been there before us, and then we started continuing our mission with the crew of 2. So what came before our flight? That was quite an interesting period of training and preparation that had to do with several things. First and foremost, we had to get ourselves accustomed to the fact that we'll be flying for a year or a little less, and then, it's kind of like we'll wait and see how it actually goes. And psychologically speaking, there was a lot of words spoken to the fact that, to that aspect of things. So psychologically, it was very acceptable, doable for a fit human being with positive attitude, work-oriented, goal-oriented. There's no problem that I can think of for this kind of person to be asked to perform this kind of mission, duration-wise. And so we did, both my flight engineer and I. We were on our way there, and we'd be making jokes that any self-respecting person has to spend a year sitting, be it a jail or a station. There were all kinds of situations that came up on station, and I digress. Training-wise, we need to say that there was a lot of attention and time spent on psychological training, a lot of attention paid to the condition that we were in when we launched, and the condition that we had to stay in during this very lengthy flight. Everybody realized the multiple factors that would be turning into impacts, both zero gravity and radiation. These are, major items, impacts-wise, but then there were multiple others. But anyway, they would make us feel very responsible for the tasks that were set in front of us. And so the physical exercise that was prescribed for us in data files, we were following it to the letter. The loads, the loading suits that we were recommended to wear during our work hours, we would do that. And so, in doing that, our skeletons would be carrying the appropriate load to stay loaded. Obviously, there's nothing we were able or expected to be able to do as far as lymph changes and lymphatic changes, blood changes, but as far as psychological status, this was something that was well within our reach, and we were doing everything. Of course, ground would be correcting us, making adjustments and incorporating changes. Any kind of misunderstandings that originated both on our or their side would be leveled, as part of good communication. There was no single time that I can think of when we would be ordering them to do something or vice versa.
Теперь, вот мы, конечно, здесь было сказано много о выходах. Станция «Мир» достаточно производительная станция. Ведь за все время, опять еще несколько статистики, ведь было произведено больше...
Some more statistical data for you. There was an excess of 100 docking events that occurred during the Salyut op. 31 Soyuz, 64 Progress cargo vehicles, plus 6 modules that were flown and docked and used to assemble the station, plus the space shuttles as far as the shuttle program. It's a lot of traffic and a lot of loads, structurally speaking. But all of this we were able to work through, and the station, instead of the scheduled 5 years, stayed up there for 15 years. We did have to perform some repairs and related activities. A whole number of variety of pieces of equipment had to be repaired or removed, and due to life and warranties and stuff like that. And the big power loss emergency took us a while to recuperate from, because we had to get some equipment resupplied using Progress vehicles and perform some R&R activities to restart computers and gyroscopes. And so this period was quite extensive from the standpoint of international cooperation. During that year, we had 3 visiting crews. one of them that kind of became our increment. And we had Bulgarians, Afghanis, and French represented on those crews. And General Chrétien, at the end of his flight, and Volkov, a cosmonaut, the crew that would be replacing us, they did their EVA, and after their spacewalk, and this was the first international crew member that performed a spacewalk in a Russian spacesuit. This was a resounding success. Of course, we were more worried, you know, those of us who were inside the station than the guys performing the spacewalk. Station supported 28 long-term increments. And of the 15 years, station was manned for 84% of time, so 12 odd years it was manned. This was station that was supposed to last for 5. In other words, and it didn't perish on its own. It was so strong and so robust that its resources proved to be above and beyond the original design. And it speaks for itself. 84% of the operational life it spent in the manned mode, and that's impressive, if anything. Regarding the spacewalks, station supported 78 spacewalks, quite a large number. 3 of them with the participation of yours truly. These were still the prototype spacesuits. They had the electrical tethers and all kinds of supply tethers. And the 3 EVAs that we did, with a workspace that was quite remote vis-a-vis the EVA hatch, just, you know, extending the tethers that you're carrying and then bundling them, and they would resist bundling. It's like a bunch of snakes surrounding, and it's easy to get bogged down with them. So that would be time-consuming. And during my 4th EVA on Mir station, but it was a shuttle EMU EVA, so without this bundle of electrical feeds, but, you know, with a small US tether. You know, this was a world of change, quite more convenient than, you know, back in the day. Luckily, you know, we had the new generation of spacesuits without the inconvenient drag-through tethers that we had to drag around. But all of that is well past us. Well past us. Regarding the science, over the year of our flight on the Mir station, we performed 1,500 experiments. A small subsection of this experiment were technical experiments that were performed in the standalone mode without crew participation. Our support was minimized. All we had to do is to stop doing physical exercises and not to move too much. For example, the thruster burn is initiated, and then equipment would be measuring the loads on the station, bending loads and so on and so forth. This was done in order to understand how load-proof, how strike load-proof the station is, and then running on the treadmill, doing all kinds of exercises, you know, force, i.e. force being applied to the station and the station resulting in vibration load. And when you're about 15 meters away from the equipment starts kind of tumbling around and going to the right, going to the left, bumping on the sides. And it wasn't the most sought-after sensation, I tell you, because these deformation wave structural loads, you're always thinking, gosh, I hope this thing doesn't fall apart on me. How do we make sure that this one doesn't depress? So these kinds of technical experiments did take place, but of the 1,500 experiments, a vast majority, an absolute majority, was done using hands, hands and all kinds of experiments, astrophysical experiments, metal melting, and crystal growth experiments, obviously medical research experiments that they would never be relieved of, you know, so we will always be forced to do those. Imagery, visual inspection, and you know, the list goes on. We're naming but a few. Once I sat down and I tried to count up all the experiments performed during such an increment. And I tallied up quite a number. So I think our increment was very efficient, productive. I don't know who did more, but we were fairly productive. And now, moving into the time frame of today and the International Space Station, you know, we'll be talking about this tomorrow, but nevertheless, the international cooperation model that was born during the Mir days was already mentioned, that 1992 Sergei Krikalev came to Houston, and I was in Houston as well. I wasn't too far because I was his backup. I was backup to Sergei. And so our work in the crew office here at JSC, our relationship and our work with the Mission Control Center here and the Mission Control Center in Moscow, and us tying all these knots, you know, connecting all these dots between the crews, between the offices, between the agency reps on the Russian and the NASA side, connecting even some government-level meetings that we, just for protocol purposes, were required to support. All this led to a better, more robust understanding between people. I told you when we came to the crew office, what we saw is a banner that read, "Russians are coming." And so some were quite friendly, overly friendly. Some were more on the questioning side. And even Charlie Bolden said, "I'm a Marine and I'm supposed to be flying with the Russians? No way." It was only during the last summit that he talked about this. But then, you know, he enjoyed the ride, and we're still friends. So it was a good team that was built, a team that brought together two offices, two astronaut corps, an astronaut corps and a cosmonaut corps, two mission control centers in Houston and Moscow, two medical communities that came and were merged into one large base that combined several institutes, I guess. Design bureaus, the Energia facility, the Boeing, because Boeing was responsible for a lot of things that had to be done. And I can see a major advantage to this international aspect that Mir station ensured, and less so for Salyut stations. But there would be no Mir without Salyut. Yeah, but without the Almaz, there would be no Salyut. It just so happens that the first station that I studied as a crew member in training was the Almaz, but that was a hell of a long time ago. And then the Almaz was a military program that was terminated. Then we switched over to the Salyut, then the Mir. Then we kind of hopped over the Buran, and kind of sideswiped it in the way, and then shuttle. So we basically touched upon all the programs that were out there to have and to hold. And I'm happy, I'm delighted, I'm so privileged to have participated in it. Thank you so much for the time, and good luck to all of you.
So now we have the other cosmonaut. For you, he is astronaut. For us, he is cosmonaut. David Wolf, who flew on Mir station, one of 7 American astronauts who were sent by United States to test our station. So, David, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, as you say that, I can't tell you, there's a feeling you get when you call me a cosmonaut, and I think when Vladimir gets called an astronaut, it shows that there's been a lot of success where we've really come in all this. We look back, Kennedy and von Braun set off a program and their Russian counterparts and to do the impossible, to go out into space and live there. Their intent was clearly to go live a long time in space and go deeply into space. And the Russians set off and did the Salyut and Mir and the space station work that you've heard a lot about here. And the Americans progressed from to the moon, and then the various Skylab and shuttle, and we see representatives of all these programs here. And then we found out that the two programs were very complementary to each other. And we set out to join them together in the shuttle Mir program. And as Vladimir talked about, there was two of everything. Essentially, two medical programs, two engineering programs, two astronaut and cosmonaut offices and such. And so what were we going, when we look back, what's so important about the Shuttle Mir program? And so I'm going to start with a bit of a, not a story, but what happened. It was time for my mission to go the sixth. I was supposed to be 7, it ended up 6. I was Wendy's backup. And there had just been a fire, there had just been a collision, and there was a great controversy on whether to continue the program. And Congress was involved, the head of NASA, administrators, committees were being set up to investigate. They were showing up in Russia where we were training. And and I was called and asked, of course, and interviewed quite a bit in all that. And as they swapped me in, and that was because some spacewalks were required, and Wendy was too small for the Russian suit, as was mentioned before. And I wouldn't do a suicide mission. Of course not. I thought things were going to be fine. I thought there was a good chance of losing the vehicle. We were losing attitude at that point in time, frequently, computer failures. But I would tell them the time to show the strength of a partnership is when things are not going well. This is exactly the time to stick with it. And I think I know it served us well in the current Международная station, ISS station. It served us so well because really I like to say it built взаимного доверия и уважения, mutual trust and respect. And that is built person to person, one-on-one. You can't make an edict or a memo or a law that says you now work together and respect each other. It was the people in this room that we see, the table and the room, that have all worked together over the years that made the base that's allowing us to succeed right now. I could tell any number of stories. So much has happened up there. I want to play on something that's been talked about here. You can go home in space. I lived on Mir and then went up to ISS several times. And each time when I got to the ISS, I was attracted very quickly to the Russian segment. And as soon as you cross that threshold into the Russian segment, the colors change. It's kind of browns and greens. There's a zapach, kind of an odor. You've heard of the zapach kosmosa. There's a zapach of the Russian segment. We tend to congregate and eat meals over there, and then I quickly put my sleeping bag over in the Russian segment in the same kind of equivalent spot that I had on Mir. And I can't tell you how home I felt in space. And then going back another time, you have built an incredible home up there. We've built one together. Part of the amazing result is that how complementary the two programs were. The wastewater from the shuttle fuel cells became the drinking water for the Mir, which then became the breathing air in part, along with the urine water in the Mir. And these systems worked so well together. It was very powerful. It was more than either one could have done alone. oh, I guess I got to always throw in one story that's never been told really up here. So I can still see the shuttle where I've been dropped off, and it's backing away. It's just gone out of sight. And the Russians have saved this incredible juice that they make, this juice with the seeds and the pulp in it. And they gave it to me, and it opens different than the American drink bag. And it's a prized possession up there. And I'm sitting at the table, and I cut it to open it, and I go, oh my God, I've cut the wrong end of this thing. I've cut the drinking end before I have cut the filling end of this thing. It has two ends. The American one does in and out in the same end. So how am I going to fill this up? I can't tell them I've done this. And I kind of roll it up, and I put a clip on it and very delicately fill it with water and put it aside to dissolve. Normally you'd squeeze it and mix it up a lot, all the sugars and the drink stuff. And we're eating the meal, and I reach over, and just out of training, unconsciously, I give it a big squish. This thing, and then I hear spring, and this little clip hits the wall on the other side. Oh my God. And then the shadow of purple stuff floating over the table. This is my first half hour on board Mir. And that's blocking the light, and we're all looking at it. It's moving too fast to have time to get anything to stop it. And I had just honestly met my two crew members because I was just swamped in, so I was making my impression here. And ground zero happened to be in the tape player. And this, by the way, these stations it could really rock and roll sometimes. You'd be up there looking out this window, and the music was, Steppenwolf jamming. You'd get into it. Anyway, it ruined the tape player, and if you've ever tried to take apart a disc player, a little bolt and spring by spring in space, with a table full of tape laid out to try to wash every little piece from the inside, talk about IFM. Anyway, about an hour later, the alarm goes off, and we've lost the humidity separation system, which we didn't get back for the most part, and which made the humidity very high the whole time. But the humidity would collect in the cold spots of the hull of the vehicle, behind the equipment, in the bays, anywhere that was kind of cool, especially on cold plates. And I'm feeling pretty bad. I've just turned a big purple wall created on the Mir space station. All those white air ducts that were gorgeous white were now purple for a long area. And honestly, when the Mir went in, I felt terrible, but the evidence was gone into the Pacific Ocean of what I'd done up there. But Pavel was doing this dirty job of cleaning condensate up, and it would run down the longerons of the vehicle. And later we analyzed it. I see some of you folks that did, and it was pond water, basically. And it was gooey. These longerons had not seen water in years, and it was running. So it was kind of a thick soup of goo. And anyway, I said to him, hey, you don't need to do that anymore. You have more important things to do up in space. I'll do that from now on. And I didn't quite realize what I was volunteering for. He was more than happy to give me the job. But for the rest of the mission, that took me till about 3 in the afternoon. Every single day to just collect the condensate off the cold spots before it got into the avionics. It would be kind of cold, so before I'd get cleaned up in the morning, I'd go behind the bay, and the electron, it would be right here kind of humming at however many thousand volts it is, collecting water with these wands. And but it goes to show there's really no too small of a job in space. In fact, it's odd that almost the smaller the job that you can assume, the more important and respected it is on board. It's that Vajenia thing in Doveria again. And so that's one I hadn't told yet. It goes on, and it's these lessons that were built one-to-one on the ground and in space. But all of us You guys have done such a fabulous job doing that, and it extends onto the engineering teams too, and that's the base against which our future programs are built. That's what stands out to me looking back.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for story.
We have the last of our colleague, last but not the least, because it is, as I said in the beginning, because this is our main engineer who helped us to fulfill everything. However, we have only 10, maybe 15 minutes left for your question and remarks. But Jana, she's Evgenia, but her nickname at the institute, nobody, it is very rare, you know, people are called by name and second name, like Inessa Benediktovna, Valery Vasilievich, but our Evgenia, nobody called Evgenia, everybody called her Jana. Let's go to Jana to solve our problem. So, but Jana fly with us starting with International Space Station. We are connected for many, many years because she was the main medical engineer on Buran project. And we were participating in this project, and therefore we knew her from that time. But when Buran didn't fly, all of us were unlucky. But we were lucky that we got Jana because of this. But on the International Space Station, she's with us all the time, right from the beginning. And tomorrow she will participate in our panel. And on International Space Station, we have actually prolongation, continuation of every part of our system, which we had on Mir. And therefore, I think that maybe we will ask Jana, and he will be not upset. Vadim, I don't see her. If she is not upset, no, I don't see. If she is upset, Dave, ask her. So then we will ask her tomorrow to talk about our facilities and other things, you know, with which we are working, which is this main office of main designer, supply and support us. But now, please, question and remarks.
Allow me just a couple of words on the technical issues related to the Mir station. And back when we were developing the Mir station, unfortunately I didn't have to participate. I was deeply involved with Buran system. But a couple of words I still would like to allow myself based on the lessons we learned while developing the Mir station, because all that was achieved on this station in terms of technical decisions, of the development of medical support system was actually used further on the International Space Station. Maybe based on a newer, more sophisticated and comprehensive technologies, but basically Mir experience was a basis for what is happening in terms of medical countermeasures on the ISS. It will be prudent to say that a lot of what we have today as part of the medical monitoring has been tested, verified on a Mir station, both as the operations activities, like Dr. Katuntsev said, during EVA sessions, during insertion, during descent and landing, and the periodic medical monitoring that we also have been doing back on the Mir station and are doing right now on the ISS. And right now this monitoring is pretty sophisticated, and while operating the International Space Station, as we say, medical requirements are specified very clearly, which is is very important, because in order for us to be able to create, to develop hardware that we need on board, we've got to be sure that the requirements are crisp, clear. And as soon as we have a well-defined spec, it sets the stage for us being able to step in and do our part by developing technical means, hardware that eventually will serve us to provide adequate countermeasures and monitoring of the performance of the crew. And when it comes to the basics of what is used right now, we need not only to go back to the Mir station, but also to the Salyut, because the first steps were taken on a Salyut station, and then we were consistently involved in a gradual process of improving and developing and modifying and redesigning, and eventually we came up with something that doesn't even resemble what we used to have back in a Salyut days, but still there is a symbolic representation, there is a spiritual link that we maintain right now between what we used to use in a Salyut and right now. For instance, the Chibis system, and it's a lower body negative pressure that we've developed. This device has been developed many, many years ago during the Salyut, and now on an International Space Station, this LBNP device, it exists, although it looks completely differently, and we're using the computer support. We have invented the automatic mode of LBNP unit operations. We have added a lot of flexibility to this unit, and very unique technical decisions have been introduced. Currently, we are monitoring slightest changes of the weight index of the crew members in the automatic mode, which also had evolved from something that have taken place many years ago on our previous station. And as far as we engineers are concerned, our participation in concert with our foreign Western partners basically increased our capabilities and increased our particular ability to develop new decisions, new hardware. Not only were we capable of design great many systems that are serving the basic interests on the crew, we have done a lot in very many areas which might seem to be benign and minor, but in fact it adds to the capabilities of the station right now and allows the crew on board and the ground support on the ground perform their activities in a much more effective way. And a lot that has been happening during Salyut and Mir times will be used for a long, long time, in spite of the fact that some ideas were introduced and realized only on the International Space Station. Now, I'm talking about Penguin suit, and the crew members who had flown, they know this space, and this additional load that this particular garment adds onto the crew member is based on the subjective perception of what the loads are. But once again, the concept is based on something that has been initially developed and introduced during the Mir station time.
So, let's accept that today it is half, and tomorrow will be continuation of our consideration of facilities and this engineering support, which is extremely important. This is understandable. And with every day, the importance of engineering support increase, but not decrease, because the technology develops more and more. Unfortunately, we don't have today time for discussion, but if somebody has very important question, go ahead, because after us, we will start the panel on Mars, which is like continuation of Russian program, and they are friendly, so we can take to 5 minutes from them. Go ahead.
Well, I would like to highlight one of the things. One of the major differences between the shuttle program and the Salyut Mir was that for the shuttle program, if something broke, we just brought the shuttle back and replaced it. But for the Salyut Mir, y'all actually had to fix things up in space, and that was done very well, so that if things broke, y'all had equipment that could be taken apart, you had spare parts that could be used and fixed, and that we saw this and relearned this. Yeah. Obviously, in the panel this morning, they mentioned about lessons learned, or better, lessons forgotten, and so that we really relearned those lessons in a good way by our astronauts being up in the Mir program. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
Just a brief comment from the kind of the PI point of view. I was fortunate to have been involved in the Mir shuttle program, and it did two things. It forced the American side and the Russian side to collaborate in science, which meant, from my perspective, I got a chance to interact with Russian colleagues. Now, I knew Dr. Gushin from work we'd done in East. I'd never met Dr. Salnitsky. Yeah. We met together. We had to establish a way of working. I think John Charles was very helpful in that process. And as a result, we had a wonderful collaboration that lasted over a decade into the space station of several projects. And I think it was a wonderful opportunity, but there was a mechanism, and we were forced to do it, and we did it. And that, I think, is a real advantage. The second advantage is in our work, we looked at crews, which meant we needed American and Russian subjects. We needed a lot of them to make statistical significance. Having a Russian and an American investigating team allowed us to get access to both sides' astronauts, and it worked very well. When we had a problem, our Russian collaborators would talk to their cosmonauts, we would talk to the astronauts, and we got a lot of subjects, and we got whole crews that we could study. So I think this experience of Shuttle Mir, I think, is unique. And for those of you here who are policymakers in programs, I hope that you will, I want to encourage more of this in the future, the formal programmatic development where the sides are asked to collaborate and mechanisms are established where that can be done smoothly. It made a big difference, and I think the field is better for it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Neil, please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate you on these many years of collaboration and working together. And I personally, for a program that I was involved with for a long time, am very, very grateful for the Mir experience, because it gave us a milestone that you can add to many of your milestones that you have in research on Mir. And that is the longest continuous cell culture in the history of space research was done on Mir. It's 137 days long. It's published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It's a real touchstone for us looking toward the future on how we're going to do research in space. That was over 15 years ago. I'm 68, and I hope to hell it's not going to take 15 years for us to try to break that record together.
Okay. Larry, yes.
I have a question. First, thank you all for your reflections. I have a question I'll address both to Vladimir and to David, since you both had the good fortune to be familiar with the shuttle program as well as the Mir program, and obviously you know about station. As we say in our student examinations, I'd like you to compare and contrast your interactions as cosmonauts and astronauts with life scientists doing experiments. Which works well? What are the lessons learned? Things like communication with the principal investigators, on-the-ground training, malfunction procedures, skill training versus specific malfunctions, time allocation. We talked earlier, we heard about the desire on Skylab to make use of the flexibility of having a little crew up for time. What worked really better, in your opinion, in one program versus the other?
Okay.
It just so happened in our human spaceflight programs that every now and then you bumped into medical people, and it basically happens during the selection process, and then they support you throughout the entire period of preparation, training, then throughout the flight, then after, post-flight, and they also participate in the period of time when you choose to go ahead and retire. So cosmonauts are always afraid of being tested, because there is always the chance that the medical people, being so persistent, that they would be able to find some abnormality and essentially decommission you as a prospective crew member. Which means that a crew member has to maintain the good relationship with the flight surgeon. The flight surgeon acts in the capacity of your father and your mother at the same time. You always rely on your flight surgeon. You rely on his ability to answer your question, to be outgoing, to be proactive, to be quick, and if anything is to happen, if you have got to take pills, you need to be open with the flight surgeon and tell him about that. If you have some personal problems, some health problems, but you are not necessarily willing to disclose this information. We have private medical conferences with the flight surgeons, and we have always been happy having those PMCs, private medical conferences, being available.
It depends on the situation, the kind of experiment. I've seen investigators and crews work great in all those situations. The adaptability is the important thing, I believe. For example, if you have an experiment where you have little communications like we did on Mir, it depends kind of who you have up there and their familiarity, and then they can report back what they did with less tag-ups, or do you have to get there's also a difficulty when you have to get permission for every little step in observation. It's kind of over-controlled. So the trick is to get the best out of the system you got in place and make it fit the experiment, and they're all going to be individual.
Okay. So we can conclude our session. And I think a lot of things were told today about station. Even more are left behind because we cannot put everything together in 2 hours. It is the whole history of long-term Russian stations. But we will have chance to continue a little bit tomorrow, because we will be together with you on International Space Station, where also we have a lot of things which continued, which came from Mir, and we will come back and forth when we will talk about this. So I am very grateful to all of you for your attention during this long session, and hope to see all of you during our Mars session today and International Space Station tomorrow. So have a rest.